Populist folk hero Oliver Anthony is out with a new song, Brink of War. Let's listen.
Well, if it weren't for my old dogs and the good Lord, they'd have me strung up in the psych ward. 'Cause every day living in this new world is one too many days to me. Son, we're on the brink of the next world war, and I don't think nobody's praying.
Now, Anthony spoke to a Fox News reporter recently more in depth about his political worldview. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
Just people to start appreciating each other for human beings and look beyond political differences and ideologies and a lot of things that I see corporate media and education doing, which is making everyone identify each other's differences and not their similarities. I want people to appreciate each other and appreciate each other's struggles and hopefully, hopefully just find the energy that was in this song and manifest it in people's own personal lives, and just trying to find similarities with each other instead of division. That's really all I want. I mean, I don't see our country lasting more than another generation the way we're headed. We've got to go back to the roots of what made this country great in the first place, which was our sense of community and we are the melting pot of the world, and that's what makes us strong is our diversity, and we need to learn to harness that and appreciate it and not use it as a political tool to keep everyone separate.
Now, he lost some fans after saying that, who disagreed with the idea of saying that America is strong and valuable because of its diversity and characterizing it as a melting pot. Are you surprised by these reactions?
Yes. So to be clear, I still saw a lot of love for Oliver Anthony and his new song on social media from right-of-center people. I actually quite liked the new song. I think I liked it more than the previous one, in fact. It was not surprising for me to hear him. You know, when you hear what he actually has to say, it's actually pretty normy. He doesn't sound, he's been almost stood up as some kind of right-wing folk hero, but he sounds pretty centrist in his orientation. I think you watched a video where he literally said that he sits pretty dead center politically.
Yeah, so right before he released these songs, I don't know if it was an album or whatever, he put a YouTube video up introducing himself to the public. It's about 9 minutes long. It's worth listening to. And in it, he describes himself this way. He says, "I sit pretty dead center down the aisle in politics and always have." And then just before that in the video, he mentions how when he was younger and conservatives were so pro-war, he was against that. He talks about how he went through a period where he was doubting his faith and that he was kind of angry and an atheist, and how he now has come back to God, but that there have been difficult moments during his life. He talks about how the song specifically, Richmond, North of Richmond, was inspired by his time, I think, working in Western North Carolina, he said, where he was exposed to the people, Richmond, North of Richmond, the political class who made life more difficult for people. He talks about not earning enough money, dollars not going far enough, and being taxed too much. Very relatable.
Talks a lot about drug
concerns.
addictions, concerns of drugs in the community. He again, pretty normie views. It sounds like someone who, he's a musician. He's making music. He's not running for office. He doesn't have a platform of ideas necessarily that he's running on. Which is actually what you would expect if someone is trying to cater to a large audience and get them interested in their music. They're actually going to not try to say necessarily divisive political things, because this is a very divided country, and it's actually hard to. It can be very hard to break through and be appreciated for your art by lots of groups of people. If you're doing a lot of talking points or railing against one side or the other for political reasons. He sounds pretty normal.
I mean, I would...
It sounds like he doesn't want to just be the guy that only the Daily Wire likes or something.
Sure. I do think that you can have a strong... I mean, this is my whole shtick, right? That populism actually is popular, and having a very strong working class ideology, it's not wanting to offend people. You can have that very strong view and be very popular, because most people don't earn very much money and are struggling in this economy. That's just the truth. So I don't know that it's especially calculated, his political ideology. It sounds like it's coming very much from his life experiences, which are the life experiences of most Americans who agree when he says, I ain't got a dollar, but I don't need a dime, talking about the joys he gets out of life despite not having any money, picking grapes off the vine, making homemade wine, smoking a bowl, trying to get what he can out of life. That's relatable content. What is interesting, though, given more perspective into his politics, is how it came to be that he was propped up, seemingly, or at least embraced, let's say, that's less stigmatized language, that he seemed to be so embraced and pushed by conservatives as specifically embodying a conservative point of view in a way that then made liberals have a knee-jerk reaction to try to find criticism.
Well, I mean, in the first video, he was railing against taxes. That's something that conservatives do, not liberals.
Well, no, I think everybody doesn't like being taxed. The question is...
Some of us don't like it more than others.
Right.
But
well, I think the liberal concern is that tax dollars aren't being spent on things that actually help communities. Instead, they're being spent on war, et cetera. And there's also an acknowledgement that rich people need to be taxed more. I think conservatives, generally speaking, want no taxes at all. And I'm not saying you, Robby, but there are a lot of people
you can put me in
the
that
conservative movement. No, not what I'm about to say. There are a lot of people in the conservative movement who are extremely affluent and exploit working class people's frustration with not having enough money to advocate for their own taxes to be cut in the 1%, which is why we've seen in the last 40 years the tax rate of the wealthy go down dramatically, while working class people have only gotten crumbs of that benefit.
And then this song obviously has a lot of a war imagery, concerns about being on the brink of war. I think I don't know that it specifically references Ukraine, but it feels kind of like that's where it's going in some way. Like it does. Because his next world war coming around. You mentioned that his anti-war, being Republican, but being not feeling out of place as someone who didn't support the war back then.
I don't know if he identified as Republican, but he used to disagree with Republicans as a youth, that Republicans were so pro-war.
Right, but it's interesting now that is such a. That it has become, even though obviously there are left populist people who, there's probably no subject we talk about that you and I agree on more than the Ukrainian foreign policy in general. But the Democratic Party is very much not there, and the Republican Party it's more mixed.
Neither party is there. There are fringe characters in both parties who are anti-war. There might be more on the Republicans than the Democrats, but the whole point is that the blob is bipartisan. It always has been, and is voting in lockstep for all of Biden's war funding.
Okay, but the base. I'm sure there's more of a appetite for anti-war non-intervention among the Democratic base than is evident if you're just polling like the actual members in Congress. But I think it's even more so in the Republican side.
I think it might be true that among voters there's more of an anti-war influence right now because of the way that Ukraine war has been framed as a Democrat issue, and voters have fallen for
Trump
that. However, the voters aren't making policy. And so why I don't think the Republican Party should get, as they continue to vote for Biden's billions of dollars of aid to Ukraine and to Israel and to funding the military bases in Niger and all of that, as the Republicans in office are voting for all of that, I don't think they should get credit for their supporters having better ideas than they do.
Right. Well, we're going to hear from a lot of the candidates tonight at the Republican debate, and I'd be very interested to hear what they say on this issue. Obviously, Trump, who's not going to be there, has very much called for a de-escalation of the Ukrainian conflict. He's not explained specifically what he would do differently, but has said that he would work to bring it to an immediate end, that it's a killing field out there, it's totally pointless, it's not a good idea. DeSantis has sometimes echoed those concerns a little bit with one could argue maybe with less actual fundamental underlying commitment. Vivek Ramaswamy, who is now almost beginning to eclipse DeSantis a little bit in terms of the polling, has very much sounded the exact same notes as Trump for de-escalating that conflict. Then you have the Nikki Haley's and the Chris Christie's and the Mike Pence's, who are much more in the traditional neoconservative.
De-escalating that conflict, but many conservatives have argued in favor of escalating a conflict with China. So we talked about this a little bit earlier this week. Vivek Ramaswamy saying that we will protect Taiwan until the end of my term in 2028, at which point we're going to let
we have superconductor independence.
So going from strategic ambiguity, which is the policy that's supposed to be de-escalatory with China, to strategic clarity. I think that was his lingo, which just says we are absolutely going to defend Taiwan and enter into World War III with China for the next 4 years, 4 to 8 years, I guess. I don't know if he thinks he's going to be a one-term president. I don't quite get that math. But
no, I don't think it was for his
years.
term. It was that's what he's predicting until we have semiconductor independence.
Okay, so for the next 4 years, and that is an escalation. You can say that that's a reasonable compromise, and China probably isn't going to kick the bear, but that is definitely an escalation. And we've seen this in some of Tucker's framing of these events, and et cetera. There are a lot of conservatives that will specifically criticize the war in Ukraine because that's seen as Biden's war, and there was political benefit to doing so, while still advocating for military interventionism all across the world. People like Tucker Carlson, who has apologized and said he regrets his past pro-war rabble-rousing, is one of those who doesn't seem to have completely shaken it because of a certain appetite for escalating with China. I'm not trying to smear anybody. I just want to be really clear that people who are genuinely invested in anti-war candidates should not be exploited by people who are going to trade on that and say, well, this war is bad because it's Biden's war, but here are all these other wars that I would.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, maybe then you'd say it's not a sincere anti-war commitment, but I don't know that the Republican base is going to be so put off by the plan Vivek just spelled out there. But I guess we'll find out.
Maybe not, but then I would call them not really anti-war, but that's fine.
Okay. We'll have more Rising right after this.